And Marilyn, you are clear to go.
All right. Good evening, everybody. I'm Marilyn McDonald, Chair of Bridgewater Conservation, and we're going to open up tonight's meeting. Just a little thing to read in. We do have a disclosure pursuant to Section 20 of the Chapter 20 in the Acts of 2021. The act relative to the extending certain COVID-19 measures adopted during the state of emergency. This meeting of the Bridgewater Conservation Commission for the town of Bridgewater will be held hybrid and accessible through the public through participation to the greatest extent possible. There will be no public attendance permitted. Citizens who wish to join in the meeting may do so via Zoom. That being said, I'm going to read into tonight's hearing. We have a public hearing, old business, abbreviated notice of 10-350 Cross, new business notice of intent 900 Bedford, conservation business, certificate of compliance, 152 Elm Street, and items of discussion if we may. So that being said, let's get right into old business, please. Abbreviated notice of resource area delineation, 350 Cross Street. Do we have Rebecca around with that?
I am on. I wasn't sure if Steve wanted to lead the discussion.
Oh, okay. I didn't even see your thing.
Yeah,
all right, so I'll open the discussion just quickly. We did go out yesterday. Steve, myself, and Eileen were out there. So Steve, I will have you start, and then me and Eileen will go.
Yep. So we did our site walk yesterday with Marilyn and Eileen, and basically we found a couple spots that the commission definitely has some questions about. I had some questions about one of the additional locations. I did touch base with Rebecca today to go over those so that she was at least prepared for the questions that would be heading her way come time for the meeting. So the main question that Marilyn had, I know circles around have the calcs been done for the one isolated area that's behind the tennis court? And then there is that other isolated area that I had spoken to you about, Rebecca, which will probably require some additional work by the applicant's wetland scientist, or at least an additional look. So I'll hand it off to you and answer those.
Yes. Can I have the screen?
I was just going to say, do you want me to give you the screen? Hold on.
Don't mind. Thanks. So I was able to move pretty quick on your comments. I did have Ken go out there today. We have results. I did not do calculations on the ice rink. The homeowner did make it as an ice rink. He did say that sometimes he actually has to put a tarp down to hold the water to make the ice rink. And normally by a couple days after warm weather, it disappears.
Rebecca, you should be all set. Sorry to interrupt you.
Thank you. So I've got a couple screens to share here. Let me start with this one. All right, so on the screen, I believe I've indicated the two areas that you had questions on. One being the homemade ice rink, and the other being, I believe it was this area north of KTB 22.
Yep, that's where me and Marilyn were walking around. We found that isolated area. Yep.
Perfect. So in the meantime, I got a hold of Ken just as soon as we hung up, and Ken was able to go out there. And I even have an email that I can read into the record, share, however. But what he found, I'm going to stop sharing this one. My surveyor came back with the info this afternoon. So if I can share one more screen without sharing all of this stuff. One moment. Share this screen. Let's see. Do you see my CAD drawing? Yes. Okay. So it looks exactly the same, except let me pull up his email. This is the email from Ken that was just sent to me at 5:28. A review of the area adjacent to a wetland flag number 21 had upland soils, but upslope of wetland flag B20, a small area was identified as wetlands. I added 3 additional flags, B20A to 20C. It extends the wetland line between the existing B20 and B19 approximately 20 feet in a finger-like extension. So what that means is right here, it means he looked in the area you asked up here and only found upland soils. But in his investigations and looking, he did discover that this could be, and so he added 3 flags. I had my surveyor locate it just a little bit ago, and so this is where it would be. I would have to update all of our buffers to reflect that, and however that, would look when we're all said and done, right? So the other thing he looked at was our ice rink, and he did confirm again that there was no wetland vegetation, nothing to support a wetland in this area. If you want calculations, I can provide them. I don't see a problem with that. But I didn't get a chance to do that yet.
Okay. So my answer to that is I would like to take a shovel out there and do my own soil pit, just to confirm. I didn't have a shovel with me yesterday. Just to verify the soils because, I do, it's not that I don't agree with Ken. I want to have my own look. I just need the spade shovel to go out there and take my own look. Because the area is a little bit further north, and I do wonder about the grade and just how dark the leaves were and how wet they were and how long the water was sitting there and the signs of moss crawling up the trees.
Yeah, he said he saw all that. Yep, he did say all
The
that.
leaves were very black.
Yeah,
Yep.
so I just want to, I want to do another transect over that area myself,
Okay,
which hopefully will be very soon. Monday and Tuesday I'm in town, and as long as the soil is able to be dug into, I will do it Monday or Tuesday, which is fine. I mean, I'm in agreement if the soils don't match because there's not much veg to also compare there. And then if we only have signs of water, that's not enough to constitute a wetland
right.
in that area. So on the other ditch area or skating rink area, I would prefer to see the calcs run just to make sure it's not isolated land subject to flooding.
Mhm.
And it's another area where I want to get a look in, say, about a week, as long as it doesn't pour and isn't consistently wet, because it's not that I agree again, but I am interested in knowing how fast the massive melt we've had over the last couple of days dissipates into the groundwater. So if it goes away by the time, early next week with the additional snowfall we might get this weekend, if there's no sign of water in that ditch area by early to mid next week, then I don't think it holds water long enough to constitute the isolated land subject to flooding either. And that's
You bet.
just, those are my statements on that. So.
There's a lot of water out there. Harry, maybe it would be a good chance too, if you wanted, I know you went out back, but it was even with Steve saying kind of like a different site with the different weather. So again, if you want to do another one, put eyes on the areas that we got found little concerns on, by all means, go ahead and do that too.
Yeah, I'll go out with Steve because I got the auger.
Okay.
Yes,
good.
you do. That would be good. Thank you, Harry. And then Eileen, any comments from you? You were with us?
Just that we wanted to look at those soils and
Mhm.
something else. I can't think of what it was. We wanted to see. Oh, I believe it was we wanted to see that rink in the spring or something, or wait a few weeks and
Yeah,
look again.
Yeah, maybe not a few weeks. I just want to see how fast the water gets out of there.
Well, we were concerned too, if there was any vernal activity, if
Yeah,
anything was coming out of that.
That's correct. The vernal pool possibility.
Yes. I mean, under the bylaw, which is a little bit different than the state act, this would potentially classify as a potential vernal pool if in fact it does contribute to the egg laying of amphibians. That being said, if it dries up, I don't know how viable it is, and I don't even know if it would be certifiable. But again, those are things that have yet to be determined and would have to wait ultimately until the salamanders choose to use it or not use it,
Right.
and the other wildlife. So that should be imminent. That really should be in the next 2 to 3 weeks.
Yeah, we are
Egg
coming up
mass-
on that season.
Egg masses should be showing up in any areas. I mean, if they don't use it this year with this high water, they probably never have used it. So that would be very telling with the amount of water that was in there. So that would be my only sort of real concern about that, is if there are actual rare species utilizing it. Other than that, I don't have any other concerns or questions besides those 2 spots that me and the commissioners found on site.
Wendy, any questions on your end?
No, I don't have any.
Okay. All right. Rebecca, I would advise, just given the areas of concern that we found, that we can, again, get the calcs, you can, look at, we'd like to see anything in that area if it's potential vermin. I would recommend continue into the second one in March. And I think we would be able to cover every area of concern and have a definitive determination, if that's what you guys so choose to do. In the meantime, I will ask if there's conservation waiting, if there's anybody with a question on this filing at 350 Cross Street, please.
Nope.
Not seeing any.
Okay, then I'll hand it back to Rebecca at this point.
I would rather continue knowing that you may not have the answers you want. I would rather come back on the first meeting, get a status update from Sobel and Harry. Did it drain? Did it not drain? And even if we have to continue one more time into the second meeting of March, understanding that.
Nope,
But
that's
I'd
fine.
rather,
Your call.
I'd rather come back March 10th. I believe that's the next meeting.
Okay,
Mhm.
let me just
And-
double check on my calendar. Yes, March 10th is our next meeting in March, so that's fine.
Thank you.
Yep, and then to pass that into Nicole.
I
And
will
then
send a letter.
Chair would entertain a motion, please.
Am I doing it or you, Wendy?
Doesn't matter.
I'll make a motion to continue to March 10th, 350 Cross Street.
Second.
All right, here in a second, any further discussion? Again, I think we'll have our information in the next meeting or two. Okay, roll call vote. Marilyn McDonald, aye. Harry Bailey,
Aye.
Eileen Prisco,
Aye.
Wendy Smith.
Aye.
All right, thank you, everyone on this file. And Rebecca, we'll see you on the 10th on that.
Perfect, thank you.
Yep. All right, moving right along, new business. So it is my understanding that this new business did not advertise, so therefore it cannot be opened or discussed. What I can say is that if somebody is here on this, that they would need to notify the abutters and make sure that it gets into the paper in the proper time. Please follow up with Nicole on that, so to make sure that you have your time limit of, I believe it's over 2 weeks or right around 2 weeks that it needs to make the paper and re-notify the abutters, and then they should be good to go for whatever meeting they get it in on.
Any questions, Zach, or I believe Mark, you're on this one as well?
No, that makes sense and appreciate the understanding. But we're working through, a lot of planning board comments right now,
Okay.
as well as town
Right, we
comments.
can't-
So let
right,
us,
yep.
okay,
Yeah,
that's
that's
all.
that's
We'll
fine.
re-notify.
it happens sometimes, so just redo it and we'll be glad to see you when you got everything
Yep.
advertised. Thank you.
Will do. Thank you.
All right, have a good night.
You
Thank
too.
you, guys.
All right, moving right along under Conservation Commission business. We have an administrative item, certificate of compliance, 152 Elm Street. Steve, please.
Yep. So did you guys get the email from Nicole this afternoon?
Yes.
Mr. Tanzi's report.
Yep.
So as I had spoken to Eileen and Marilyn on site yesterday, I went out on Tuesday to visit the site to check, because we had visited a couple weeks ago to do the inspection. I did it with Greg, but the snow was it was still really bad as far as a visual perspective. So what I did was I went back out on Tuesday and I saw that everything we had concerns about during the visit back in a couple weeks ago had dissipated. The snow went away. The actual detention basins drained very well. So therefore, and then in conjunction with that letter that you guys received today from Mr. Tanzi, he confirmed that our site visit was in fact backed up by the fact that the stormwater detention basins are working effectively. And he also suggested that, along with myself, that this be issued a certificate of compliance.
All right, well, good timing on your visit. All right, the chair would entertain a motion, please, on the certificate of compliance request for 152 Elm Street.
I'll make a motion to approve the certificate of compliance for 152 Elm Street.
I second.
All right, we have a second here, and any further discussion? Hearing none, roll call vote. Marilyn McDonald, aye. Harry Bailey,
Aye.
Eileen Prisco,
Aye.
Wendy Smith.
Aye.
All right, thank you very much, guys, on that. Okay, approval of minutes.
I'm just playing a joke on you. I forgot to put those.
I
in the
was gonna
packet.
say,
So
I'm gonna.
It's
tell
not
the
you.
truth. I didn't see any minutes.
It's not you, Marilyn. It's me.
I'm
So
like,
those will
oh,
be
I
on
missed
for your
something.
next meeting.
That's fine.
Don't worry, you're not losing it.
That's fine. Back in the day, we had many months of minutes we would get to, so no
I'm-
worries, honey, no
I'm
worries.
trying to stay on it, helping out with planning board minutes too. Sometimes I get a little mixed around, so I apologize. I'll have
It's,
you on the
it's
next
all
one.
good, believe me, we've been
No
ahead of the
worries.
game with minutes. It's all good, it's all good.
All right,
No worries, honey, no worries.
okay.
Discussion of items, Steve, anything under your stuff with the environmental planner report, anything for you to discuss with the conservation members?
No, I talked to you guys a little bit after yesterday with what we got sort of in the pipeline, what's coming your way. So, there's nothing pressing. There's nothing kind of going on outside the realm of conservation permitting right now. I mean, we're working on some grants and doing some follow-up information for Styles and Hart and stuff like that. But nothing concrete to update you guys on yet. So, I mean, granted, if you guys have any questions, if you want anything addressed in an environmental planners report in an upcoming meeting, feel free to always call and let me know to check in on something. And then this is the time period where if you want things addressed, you kind of tell me, and then this is where I get to report back to you guys on them. So anything you guys may pick up over time, this is the place for it.
All right, great, thank you, Steve.
Sure.
Anything else,
Marilyn.
from any of the commissioners?
I have
Yep.
something, Marilyn.
Yeah.
It's Nicole. I emailed you guys today. I just wanted to reiterate it because I know everyone's busy. I have the plans you guys requested at the last meeting for Vernon.
Yep.
I did
So-
see, yep. Yep,
So feel
perfect.
free. I don't know if Steve will be in tomorrow. I don't know what
I
the
don't
deal
think
is
we'll be picking
exactly.
them up tomorrow.
Yeah.
No,
So, but
Next
Monday and
week.
Tuesday, Steve will be there, and then the rest of the week, I'll be there next week. So feel free to come by anytime. Just give us a heads up, and I have them there for you. Okay.
Perfect, thanks for making
All
that verbal too to us. Thank you, honey.
Yep.
We'll get them.
Okay.
Okay, anybody else with anything?
So,
Okay, then you know what the chair would entertain, please.
motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
aye.
All right, thanks, guys. I'll talk to you soon.
Aye.
Have a good one.
You look confused, Mark.
Oh, I thought there was gonna be like you could ask questions or something.
Questions about which filing?
Just general conservation commission jurisdiction over certain issues.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I can answer general questions. I mean, the best thing to do is to ask me during office hours. But if you want to pose a question now, we've got a couple commissioners left here. We could certainly talk about it. I'm
Sure.
open. Go
Yeah.
ahead.
The question is, it's not going to be a specific property, but just if a citizen notices a property that has a wetland on it and notices that there is it's sort of invasive species growing in that wetland where there wasn't invasive species growing there before, what can that citizen do? Can do
Oh,
report that, or
are you the gentleman that emailed me?
yes?
Okay, so the Japanese knotweed.
Yeah.
Yeah, so no, sorry I didn't get back to you. We've been split shift and a little busy in the office. So, but this is certainly something that I do. It's not that I enjoy talking about, but Japanese knotweed is one of those nasty, gnarly plants that was a derivative of bamboo that originated down south, and they started to use to stabilize the sides of highways, coincidentally. That was its go-to use. And yes, it spreads very easily because it produces berries and the birds pick them up and they kind of poop them everywhere. So that's how they spread. So that's why it's difficult. So that once they get into wetlands, because they prefer the wetland habitat, they also take over because they're just more they can take advantage easier of the situation, and they can also live in more difficult conditions than our typical native plants. So that's why you see them taking over on behalf of native plants. But yes, I have been a part of many situations where we work towards removing noxious and invasive plants. A lot of these processes happen through grants when you're talking about like the town perspective. So if the town were to approach a situation like this and want to clean up a noxious weed from a waterway, or in this case, Japanese knotweed from a wetland, there's certainly opportunities. Now, having it part of a municipal budget in order to do so is a little bit difficult because it is costly and time consuming and very labor intensive.
Exactly. And is that a reason we should we should check in on these developments and make sure that they're not taking over. Because I went down to this particular property today and I saw also Phragmites growing in
Yeah.
the wetland, and they only developed this property within the past, what, 10, 12 years.
Mhm.
And it seems as though they just developed another property on the exact identical wetland woodland situation. And that area is free of Japanese knotweed and Phragmites at the moment.
Really?
Now, is there any way to prevent it, or to get them to maintain their area?
Prevention, that's a big one. That's a
'Cause-
difficult one. And Phragmites is actually more hardy than Japanese knotweed, surprisingly.
Yes, and this is wet.
Phragmites is almost constituted as a wetland indicator these days because it does so well. The other difference with Phragmites that poses a real problem is here, like I'm from the Cape, so on the Cape it's a very large indicator of issues because it needs fresh water to survive. So when you have Cape Cod and we see Phragmites and we see a lot of Phragmites, we get concerned in areas where we should be seeing a lot of saltwater intrusion in the coastal area, but we see a lot of Phragmites, and then we're wondering where all the sheet runoff comes from. The difficult part is proving who's responsible, because anytime you disturb land, you kind of open it up for invasives to get in today's day and age. So if you scrape that soil, you're opening it up to any sort of invasive that may be traveled or contributed by bird excrement or whatever the case may be. So to attach it to a contractor or a developer is difficult. What I've seen in the past is you'll see private developers take it on if the Conservation Commission's able to notice it as an issue heading into the project. They'll say, can we do something to address the Phragmites and Japanese knotweed in exchange for, not in exchange, but as part of the overall maintenance plan of the development? If
Yeah.
there is, if it goes into an order of conditions, because the difficult thing here is in order to put teeth behind some sort of order or plan to get someone to address an issue that is otherwise cost ineffective, and to what they're trying to do is really just overhead. So that's the hard part. Not to say it's impossible, but it's costly and it's difficult to get people to pony up the dough for it.
Now, what if it's a 100-year flood zone? Is that the same issue?
That question's a little bit different. You'd probably be able to ask FEMA. FEMA might have some grant opportunities because they do most of the management at the federal level of floodplains. I mean, the Conservation Commission does oversee local areas that are subject to flooding. So bordering land subject to flooding, which would be bordering on rivers to a certain extent, certain elevation based on FEMA flood maps and ferment maps. However, I don't know what they would order, honestly, in the case of invasive species. I know that Fish and Wildlife does a lot of work with invasives because they're kind of the front runner on biota, flora and fauna. So all your animals and all your plants. So you see a lot of zebra mussel information that constantly, floods the airwaves because zebra mussels came over from Europe and now they're clogging all the rivers in the central parts of the United States, and they're actually out competing the native species. So they're becoming essentially a animal version of Japanese knotweed. And what they do is they grow so rapidly and so vivaciously that they choke out waterways in a way that you don't see many organic organisms do as far as animals. You see it a lot with the carp that are in the Mississippi River, like silver carp, another species that just somehow just is able to beat out the natives. So it's not a new problem. It's an expensive problem. And trying to tie it to someone's responsibility list is difficult. That's probably the biggest hurdle that we face in dealing with invasives management.
And there's no, you mentioned something about a management plan. There are management plans is that a typical thing? Is that on
I've only seen it in my career on developments and like shopping areas and plazas where you're obviously putting in a use that the town or a lot of stakeholders want. And it's one of those nice things that you can add to the package of an incentive to the Conservation Commission to maybe ease up on a local, not necessarily waive something, but maybe ease up on one of their restrictions a little bit. One of the biggest cases I worked with Phragmites was in Hingham at the Derby Street Shops. If you're familiar with those, there's a big wetland out front that's right
Yeah.
by the signage, and it's a stormwater detention basin. And we did sort of an experiment where we covered the entire area with a black nylon tarp.
Yeah.
And that's the way to kill Phragmites most effectively is you burn the root system out. Because you don't want to use obviously toxics and chemicals because then you're directly contributing them to the groundwater. So you got to try to come up with these less invasive management procedures.
Oh, after the fact. But what, what about before the fact? Like say this very virgin woodland wetland area that just opened up within the past 2 years next to the other one that was open for the past 10 years. Is there a way to have a management plan for that?
Ultimately, that would boil down to
Because it doesn't have the invasive species yet.
No, I know, and that's kind of the magic bullet. That there's a magic bullet in every arena, and if it's invasive management, that's the bullet we're looking for, because you have, how can we get in the way of this and just not let it happen? And we haven't figured that out yet, because of like what I said. The second you open up the earth and allow natural functions to happen, and because we have in the area those invasive species, it's not going to be long before they find their way into that soil. And that's just through wildlife. And how do we stop wildlife? I mean, that's the main route of transportation and transmission is wildlife.
Well, yeah, but isn't the responsibility to maintain those wetlands?
It is, but just because an invasive species is growing in a wetland doesn't mean it's negatively impacting the performance standards. If you can, so the commission here, right? So they're tasked with administrating and making decisions on a set of regulations that each type of wetland has a set of performance standards, which is the minimum bar that needs to be met in order for a project to occur either close to or in a wetland. So once that bar is met, and the commission agrees with that bar has been met, they can approve or deny a project. If it hasn't been met, they deny it. If they believe it has met it, they approve it. So by saying you're speculating that invasive species might come in to a developer as sort of a negative performance standard, that's all speculation. The burden of proof falls on both sides, and it would be unfair for the commission to institute such a order to say we restrict the growth of any Japanese knotweed, because one, how would you levy that penalty, not penalty, but that order, and then not have any surefire way or plan in order to stop it? Because we can't sit here, I mean, because in a perfect world, we could sit here and say, don't do this, don't do that, don't do this, but we have to give some leeway in order to, not be frivolous. I don't want to say, because I know it's important, but at the same time, it's very difficult to say to a developer who owns the land and is trying to develop it in a conscientious way, taking into consideration the performance standards of the wetlands. And then there is a chance that invasives will come in. Invasives can come in upland areas. They can come in wetland areas. So
they affect the performance of the wetlands. Phragmites.
But you would have to prove that.
So that's our only recourse, is to let the developers pretty much
but that's where we probably would differ in opinion, because Phragmites growing in a wetland doesn't deem the wetland useless. The wetland still provides the function that it needs to provide between wildlife habitat, groundwater discharge, being a natural filter of groundwater. As a matter of fact, Phragmites probably, in all honesty, filters water a little bit better than native species, and stabilizes banks better than native species. There's a lot of there's the reasons why before they understood the impacts of invasive species, they sort of found out what they were good at and said we could use it for this stabilization technique, and then they didn't realize it grew like bamboo and was one of the most difficult things to eradicate on the face of Earth. So it's one of those mistakes that happened, but unfortunately, it's a very tough nut to crack, because how do you tie it? What do you tie it to enforce it? That's the difficult question. So
they-
I mean, if you in some conscientious towns, like there's certainly areas that are more conscientious about invasive management than others.
which towns?
I could say that if you look at towns with a lot more resources dedicated to environmental, so like the Lexingtons of the world, Concords, Westons, areas that are kind of on that outer belt of Boston to the west. There's some.
The towns with money.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Yeah, towns with a lot of economic resources, because that's where the kind of the film hits the cutting room floor here, is who has the money and who doesn't, because these invasive species management projects are typically expensive, and they only really there's debate on how much impact and how much positive impact they have on the wetlands that you're actually trying to protect, because some of these practices, in order to get rid of some of these invasive species like Japanese knotweed and Phragmites, the most effective way is to just cover the entire wetland with the black tarp. Now that would be a vast negative impact on performance standards for the rest of the wetland while you're trying to treat the Phragmites. You could argue that the management plan is doing more damage than the Phragmites existing is.
Well, but what about a prevention plan?
Yeah, that's the $1 million question.
Like the damage is done on the others that are, the towns.
The only surefire way to prevent Phragmites and Japanese knotweed from taking over is to not disturb the ground. And in order to not disturb the ground, you would have to put a cease to a lot of work, pretty much all work.
Yeah, but they could have someone go out there occasionally and look for it.
I mean, I've done turtle sweeps in my career before, and I've never had to sweep for the beginnings of Phragmites, because you'd be surprised it establishes its root system before it starts poking through the ground. So it could have an elaborate root system before the signs of it even coming to the surface are there. So you could totally miss out on, stopping it from getting it to the point where you'd have to have a person out there legitimately every day, constantly checking for seeds and trying to turn the soil over. And it's a lot of labor intensive work, and we all know that labor costs money. And then on the flip side of the coin is, what is the actual positives of these management plans? Because what are the negatives? Because any good project is going to come in with a team full of wetland scientists that can talk about some of the habitat value that invasives actually do provide, between the berries of Japanese knotweed, which a lot of birds eat, the stability of bank. I mean, they do a lot
I
of.
don't think Japanese knotweed doesn't have berries, does it? It spreads by rhizome.
Rhizome, yeah. I mean, Japanese barberry. I'm sorry, I'm confusing them. So yeah, rhizome spreaders are the like the bamboo family. Yeah, and those are the most difficult to eradicate, because essentially you have to box them in.
Definitely.
I mean, maybe something like that. I mean, if you, I guess, I mean, it's just a tough one. It's much more manageable actually in fully aquatic situations, to be honest, because you actually control everything that's in the water. Terrestrial invasive species management is very difficult, because you have more environmental factors to deal with. And in the water, you have, depending on anoxic, oxic situations, you could change that, and you can fluctuate with that, and you can add chemicals or organic compounds that can effectively mitigate the growth of these invasive species. Whereas on terrestrial land, there's really one answer: it's Roundup. And where does that end up running off to? I mean, Phragmites is the most, besides tarping it, the most other effective way is to cut the stalks down and spray it with Roundup.
Yeah,
I've
I think
seen that.
carbohydrate.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen that deployed in buffer zone areas, but they've even a lot of places have started to back off of that technique because of the potential impacts of the Roundup on groundwater. It's a tricky one. It's a tough one. But I do share your concern because I know how devastating the plants can be once they do take over. So it's unfortunate, but it ends up being one of those things that you hopefully can deal with after it's already come in and established itself. But hey, I'm willing to talk about it all day, as you can tell. I mean, I would love to come up with an answer as much as you would. I don't see the answer. And I've spent my career doing this in various capacities. So it's a hard one.
So it's basically just a matter of proving that it actually is a cost to.
Yeah, I think the biggest question to answer is if you come up with a clear-cut negative impact of Phragmites and the Japanese knotweed and how it is actually impacting a site negatively according to the Wetlands Protection Act, then the Conservation Commission could step in and say, we would like to see a management plan for this invasive species.
And do it before the whole town is inundated with invasive plants and.
I would say yeah, this is true. I would say on most development projects, it would be maybe something that if you show up at like a planning board, say, hey, have we thought about invasive species management? Yep. Because then they could kick that over to the Conservation Commission. It's another one of those things that also, once you start like a policy or a rule or a regulation, and you start applying it to one subdivision or this subdivision or this property, then you got to start doing it for everybody. And then it becomes more, and granted, that could be a great thing because that could turn into a town-wide model for other towns to follow to eradicate it.
No, that's great because what I was at the planning board meeting last week for basically for 900, but nothing against.
Okay.
Like nothing against them. I don't know anything about their history, but I brought it up and they said talk about it at the Conservation Committee. But I was also at another planning board meeting like 3 weeks ago, and they're talking about historical paint colors. So I think the importance of keeping invasive plants out of the town and everywhere in the town, just in my opinion, destroying the water supply, in my opinion, is more important than historical colors. So it's. Okay.
I tend to agree there. I mean, I see the importance of, history and all that stuff. But this is why I say planning, because what people get confused a lot is, so Phragmites and Japanese knotweed don't just grow in wetland areas. Sure, they like wetland areas, but one of the main places they occur is in stormwater detention basins and stormwater catchment areas. So in those areas, there are no restrictions about what grows in them. So for them to be saying, we are requiring all these stormwater structures that will allow standing water and probably will have, I mean, you've driven by the ice skating rink, correct? On 18?
Probably, yeah. Not recently.
There's Phragmites that needs to be cut down like twice a year because if you pull out of there, you can't see over the Phragmites and it's a traffic hazard.
Yeah.
So what will happen is a lot of these sites, right? So the wetland areas in town is typically only applies to 15 to 20% of homes. So there's 80% of homes out there that would potentially have no restrictions on Phragmites or Japanese knotweed, which is why I gear it more towards it needs to be a systemic bylaw or policy that's throughout all the regs as opposed to just one channel. Because if it's only one channel and that channel only covers 20% of the town, that other 80%, we're going to have a significant problem because 80% doesn't have to, comply with it. And that's where all the plant biota is going to come from. And then it's just going to take over anyways. And then the cost goes
I
up.
agree. Well, it already has. So
no, I agree. And trust me,
one chunk out of it.
Yeah. I mean, I'll gladly go out and check
like
out
shining a flashlight and going the speed of light. It's not going faster.
You're right. I mean, I'll gladly do some site walks with you if you want to show me some areas that you have concerns about, and maybe there's some grants that we could approach and do some sort of testing. The other thing is Bridgewater State's right there. There's a lot of environmental work that goes on at the college. Maybe there's some students that are willing to do an experiment. And, maybe you could bring them in and say, hey, we've got this issue that I've been, talking to I've got this personal interest in invasive species management for the health of wetlands. And I would like to, work in conjunction with the town and the Conservation Commission. And maybe we could test some different methods and get a teacher involved. And then that way we have, a collaborative group effort to maybe come up with a policy that we can sort of test and run.
Yep.
I mean, because that's sort of the grass, not to use grassroots, but because we all know how these things grow, but
Phragmite roots.
the Phragmite roots process here and grow it from the ground up. I mean, that's how you see these policies in other towns start. I mean, a lot of towns have stormwater policies where they charge based on impervious area. That came from an unfunded mandate from the federal government that towns had to start taking care of their stormwater. So these things do start literally very small and they turn into movements. And that's especially how they start in the environmental arena.
Town charge per impervious area. I'll look into that. Okay.
Yeah, because impervious area, that's where you're talking about your sheet runoff that contributes highly to Phragmites growth because they really absorb that surface runoff, which could carry contaminants, oils, gases that will typically kill a lot of native vegetation, but the Phragmites are so hardy.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it's because they're evolved or they're just suckers for punishment, but they survive it somehow, which typically some runoff kills a lot of things.
All right, I'll look into that. All right.
Yeah, and feel free to call the department anytime. I'm trying to get some discussions with the library lined up, and these are the types of topics that I would love to engage residents in that have concerns about these types of things, hunting, open space and recreation use. And that's the other area is because soon we're going to be opening up these parks and redoing them all. And, we don't want to see a bunch of invasives in the parks that people are trying to enjoy because honestly, they're not as nice to look at as natural landscapes are around here.
Definitely not.
So aesthetics is a value that is protected in the Wetlands Protection Act. So that may be what you hang your hat on. Aesthetics is a small piece, but it is a piece. And we don't like to look at Japanese knotweed and Phragmites.
No, I don't.
So I'm
Never
right
did.
there. I'm right there with you in belief that we need to do something about this emerging problem. And it's been emerging for almost 15 years now. Because I can remember the Phragmites growing on Cape when I got my career started. So it's not the first time and it won't be the last time I come in contact with it.
Yeah. All right. Thank you.
All right.
You're welcome. Yeah. And in a couple of weeks, we'll be hearing Bowler again. And they might be the type of situation where you could interest a large warehouse in trying to run some sort of study and talk to the commission more and say, hey, if we got a group of students together and you happen to have some invasives show up, would Amazon like to sponsor a study to see if we can do something about invasive species management? We're going to run it through the school, blah, blah, blah. Those types of projects end up sometimes funding large scale, they place people, they create positions in some municipalities. I've heard, from time to time. I mean, large scale projects do good work for communities.
All right. I'll think about that.
Yeah.
I got a job to do. All right.
All righty. Anyone else? Wendy, Harry, any questions?
I
No?
just have a quick question about the MAP conference, but it can wait.
Okay. That's coming up, isn't it?
Yeah, it's next Saturday's one of the courses that I signed up for.
Okay. I'll make sure Nicole got that out.
Yeah, I just sent her an email just so I sent it while I'm thinking of it.
I know
I
had said something to her about asking Jennifer, I forget, because it has to be okay through the department budget. So
yeah,
we'll get it done. And then that's your last class, right?
I have two.
Two. Okay. So you're
Yeah.
almost done.
And I mean, if I needed to pay for one, that's fine. Because I put down two on the registration that I left on her desk.
Okay. I'll talk to her about it tomorrow because we're all going to be remote. It looks like.
Okay.
And then if you'd like to see this site out at Cross Street, just let me and Harry know and we can bring it out there with us.
Yeah, well, when do you think, I just emailed you and Marilyn and Eileen, because I could have gone yesterday. I was home.
I know, I was
Like,
thinking
I
about
was
that.
disappointed when I heard that you guys went, because
would've-
yesterday
you would've-
afternoon I did absolutely nothing. I was home all afternoon, and I was actually gonna send an email on like Tuesday saying, "Oh, is anybody doing a site visit this week before the meeting? Because I'm around." And I forgot to send it, but nobody
Well,
contacted me either. So
Yeah,
like,
you would have constituted a quorum. That's why. Because anything more than 2
mhm.
constitutes a quorum, and then we have to advertise for it. So
You
it
have
was
to
just
advertise for what?
for 3 or more.
What do you mean advertise? I don't understand.
So if you had come,
Mm-hmm.
that would have been a quorum of the Conservation Commission, which would have meant we would have had to advertise that you guys were going out to a certain site at a certain time posted. And that would
Oh.
have had to been posted 48 hours in advance.
Oh,
So the nice thing to do with commissions is
I was
to
on
kind of,
vacation all week.
no, I know, because I thought about that when I got on site. I was like, oh crap, it's school vacation week. I
Yeah.
didn't even realize until halfway through the week, honestly. But I was like, it's school vacation week. I was like, Wendy's got to be available if Brockton's got the same schedule as everyone else down here. So, but no, we can. I know you favor later in the day because you're available later in the day, and it's
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard when I'm working for sure, because you guys are finishing up, or I know our schedules don't all coincide and are able to do it. It's like vacation weeks and summertime is the best time for me when I'm more flexible.
and in all honesty, yeah, that this summer should be busier, and we should have a lot more site walks, I imagine.
Mhm.
But for instance, if you're ever available and you want to go see something that's on the agenda, just call the office and tell me
Yeah.
that.
Now, when do you think you and Harry, did you mention a time, or you don't know yet?
I have to get out there Monday or Tuesday.
I'll see. I'll be back to work.
If I'm gonna see it, because I have surgery on Wednesday. So,
Oh, okay.
and then I hope to be back early the next week. But again, I'm sort of on this floating schedule where it's, I'm home a couple of days, 3 days a week, and then I'm in the office 2 days a week. But even the days I'm home, if I need to be in town, I come into town. So,
Mhm.
and those days are pretty much just site visit days where if like today I was on a couple of site visits in Bridgewater today. So
Brr.
yeah, it was chilly.
It was chilly out there today. Yesterday was a great day to go.
Yeah, it wasn't 70. Yeah. So, but anyways, if you have
Well, keep
anything
me
you-
in mind. You can always shoot me an email if by chance I can make it. You know,
Well,
I
if
hate
you
to
want to-
make an issue out of the one yesterday because I could have gone, but I would like to know when they are and if there's any chance that I can.
that one also literally happened. It came together yesterday morning, essentially, because Marilyn, we had spoken about it Wednesday or Tuesday, and she said she would contact me Wednesday, and then Thursday morning I got a text from her saying I'll see you on site in like an hour. So it was just one of those things where it was just, and I know you're right in town, and I could have just called over, but if you want to see something, that's why I'm here. So if
Yep.
you have availability and you say I'm available, are you available? Can we go see this? It's on the agenda. Sure thing.
Yeah.
I can see it.
Okay. All right. Other than that, nothing.
So Steve, call me when you're ready, because I don't leave Bridgewater.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm either here at my house, at the restaurant, or I'm down the transfer station. I'm all
So-
in Bridgewater.
So let's see. So Monday or Tuesday, and it depends on how much snow we get tomorrow,
Okay,
because it's gonna have to be snow free in order to see what we need to see.
all right, just give me a call.
I will, Harry.
All right.
All right.
Bye, guys.
You guys have a good
Good
have a
night.
good night.
You also.